When I woke up in a hospital room, I saw white curtains moving in front of me. I checked and found my head wrapped in bandages. It felt strange, like my memory was scattered after hitting my head. The pain all over my body from falling down the stairs felt like a dream. A doctor came in and asked if I remembered what happened. I said I fell down the stairs. The doctor looked relieved, saying there wasn't major damage. I had been unconscious for a few hours, and my husband and son had called the ambulance. Feeling embarrassed, I smiled. But then I realized my family wasn't there. When I asked the nurses, they hesitated, exchanging glances. One finally said, "It's hard to say. My name's Luna, and I just turned 45. My dad was an art teacher, so I learned how to draw from him since I was little. He not only taught me to use a brush, but also instilled good manners. Inspired by him, I dreamed of opening my own art school someday. Dad's encouragement boosted my confidence, and I always got praised in art classes at school. After marrying and starting a family, my dream of opening a school faded away. But when my parents passed and I inherited our family home, my husband and I decided to move back. It was bittersweet being in our old home without my parents, but living there with my husband and son brought me immense joy. The studio where my dad taught art to the neighborhood kids remained untouched, thanks to my mom's regular cleaning. As my husband placed some boxes in a corner, he asked me to move aside, interrupting my nostalgic thoughts about the studio. Before we moved back to our family home, my husband decided to quit his job. He felt stuck, both in his role and financially, so he wanted a change. Using our move as a push, he left his job to start an online secondhand business from our spacious home. I worried that his decision might not go smoothly, but he dove into acquiring new items, and the packages kept coming. Our house was filling up with cardboard boxes, and we had to store many items in an unused room upstairs. Meanwhile, our son Daniel, who had dropped out of college, was also spending more time at home, helping with the business but struggling to find his own path. Their decisions were unilateral, without much discussion with me. Despite my anxiety, I saw them working together and achieving their goals. They seemed to enjoy the process, so I focused on supporting them and creating a good work environment. My dream of opening my own studio had to wait. Instead, I found myself sitting in the now empty studio, feeling sad seeing my father's tools and books piled up. Holding one of his cherished brushes, I heard my husband asking what was on my mind. With the brush in hand, I turned to him, expressing my desire to run a studio like my dad. Starting a studio seemed daunting at that moment. My husband listened quietly, nodding in understanding. He reassured me, acknowledging my talent in the creative arts. He hoped I could support him until his business took off. Though I felt a bit sidelined, his comforting words eased my worries. He suggested we support each other's dreams as a family, working hard together. His kindness and warmth made me happy, even though the prospect of opening my studio felt distant. One evening, while they were busy working upstairs, I decided to quietly bring them some drinks. As I approached, I heard them packing. When I entered, they stopped and looked at me in surprise. I reassured them, offering drinks and acknowledging their hard work. My husband pointed to a famous brand wallet on the desk, explaining the challenges of their new venture. Despite my worries, seeing him happier than before kept me silent. However, I noticed they started checking prices and information of goods more frequently, signaling their dedication to the business. Whenever we went shopping or out, they were always checking market prices on their smartphones. Even on our days off, if there was a market nearby, they'd eagerly browse the goods, saying valuable things could be found unexpectedly. I grew tired of their constant focus on prices, even when it came to pieces left by my father, a renowned artist. To me, those were cherished memories, not items for sale. Despite our differing values, I tried to remain patient. Then, one day, they jokingly talked about selling a piece I created, pretending it was done by a famous artist. At first, it seemed lighthearted, but as the conversation turned serious, I couldn't hold back my anger. I yelled at them, feeling deeply hurt by their suggestion. The idea of using my skills, learned from my father, for such purposes disgusted me. Seeing how upset I was, they quickly tried to backtrack, claiming it was just a joke. Perhaps because of this incident, they started keeping me out of the business discussions. Sensing their distance, I avoided going upstairs where they worked. One morning, when my husband was supposed to be out on an important deal, he called me in a panic, saying, "Luna, something terrible happened. I forgot some crucial documents needed for the meeting. I'm on my way back now. but it looks like I'm going to be late. Can you please hurry and get the documents and wait for me at the front door?" My husband's voice sounded urgent as he explained the situation over the phone. He was rushing back home in the car, trying to save time by exchanging the documents at the front of the house. "I can't get through to Daniel, who's supposed to be at home. Maybe he's out. I don't know. But there are some documents on the desk upstairs, so please bring them all. And really don't look inside the documents. They're very important," he emphasized. Feeling slightly offended by his lack of trust, I assured him I wouldn't peek. Despite this, I went upstairs for the first time in a while and was shocked by the mess. Daniel, whom I thought wasn't home, turned around in surprise at my visit. After explaining the situation, he pointed at the desk, absorbed in his computer screen. Feeling annoyed by his indifference, I grabbed the envelope of documents and headed downstairs. But just as I reached the stairs, I heard a car braking outside. Panicking, I stumbled and fell down the shaking stairs, experiencing intense pain. As my consciousness faded, I found myself dreaming of my father, drawing together in his class. With his gentle voice, he praised my drawings and shared his favorite artwork, one symbolizing hope. My father's words echoed in my mind. "You can face any difficulty. Life always needs hope." His encouragement lingered with me as I regained consciousness in a hospital room surrounded by fluttering white curtains. Sitting up, I felt the discomfort of bandages wrapped around my head, as if the impact had scattered fragments of my memory. It all felt surreal, like the pain from the fall had been a mere dream. A doctor entered, asking about the events before I lost consciousness. When I mentioned falling down the stairs, the doctor seemed relieved, indicating there was no major damage. I had been unconscious for just a few hours, and my husband and Daniel had called an ambulance. With a sense of embarrassment mixed with relief, I couldn't help but smile. However, as I realized my family wasn't present, I inquired about them from the nearby nurses, who exchanged glances nervously. Before they could respond, a police officer entered the room, causing a shift in the atmosphere. My anxiety grew as the nurses' expressions changed, and they quickly left the room, leaving me confused. As the officer approached, a sense of fear gripped me, and I anxiously asked, "What's wrong?" The officer sighed deeply before delivering the news. "It's difficult to tell you this." Confusion clouded my thoughts as I instinctively tilted my head. The nurse had used similar unsettling words earlier, and now an unpleasant feeling lingered in the hospital room. The officer's explanation only added to my bewilderment. He gently explained that my husband and Daniel were currently at the police station being questioned. I couldn't comprehend what he meant. He went on to reveal that instead of showing concern for me when the ambulance arrived, they behaved suspiciously. When the police arrived, my husband hesitated to show them the staircase where the accident occurred. The officer continued, mentioning they had been monitoring them for some time, had discovered counterfeit goods and forged certificates in our home, leading to their arrest. The documents I was asked to bring before the accident turned out to be forged appraisals. As the officer's words sank in, a wave of disbelief washed over me. Was he suspecting me of being involved too? Thankfully, after my husband and Daniel's statements at the police station, they understood I had no part in their illegal activities. To further prove my innocence, I handed over my smartphone without hesitation. After being cleared by the doctor, I took a taxi home. The journey was silent, with the distant town lights reflecting off the cloudy night sky. As the taxi navigated through unfamiliar streets, my heart felt lost in darkness. But amidst the turmoil, fleeting moments of happiness flashed through my mind. When Daniel was younger, he used to bring me his school textbooks, notebooks, and other items that needed his name written on them. Sometimes, when I was busy with the dishes, my husband would jokingly suggest that he should write instead of me. But Daniel would always insist that he wanted me to do it because he loved my beautiful handwriting. While I washed the dishes, I would tell them to leave the items on the table, promising to write on them later. But my husband, with a mischievous grin, would sometimes pretend to copy my handwriting while Daniel was away, teasingly claiming he could mimic it perfectly. When Daniel returned and saw his name already written, his smile would light up the room, and he'd thank me with a heartfelt "Thank you, Mom." His happiness back then always warmed my heart. As the taxi passed through town, my heart weighed heavy with sorrow. I closed my eyes, silently wishing that when I opened them, everything would just be a bad dream. I longed to return to those simple times and scold my husband for trying to copy my handwriting instead of waiting for me. My thoughts spiraled, wondering where everything went wrong. Amidst the waves of despair and sadness, I started to question if my husband and Daniel had valid reasons for their actions. But deep down, I couldn't fathom any excuse for creating counterfeit goods. Arriving home, I found the once cluttered room now bare, with black cords and empty spaces where the computer and other items used to be. The investigation into my husband and Daniel's activities took several days, confirming my innocence and revealing their secret involvement in counterfeiting without my knowledge. The officers showed me sympathy as they delivered a straightforward message. Both of them are desperately arguing that you're not involved. They've been proactive in submitting their phones and computers for examination, and your name hasn't come up at all. It seems they really didn't want to cause you any trouble. Feeling conflicted, I questioned why they would involve themselves in such a risky endeavor if they didn't want to cause trouble. Sighing deeply, I looked up at the sky, the years passing by on a tranquil spring afternoon. In our garden, beautiful flowers bloomed, marking a year since I reopened my father's studio. As I opened the windows, letting in a refreshing breeze, 3 students awaited my guidance. Taking my seat, I suggested drawing with the theme of hope, reminding them of our shared past struggles. With serious expressions, they listened intently, each picking up their brush to face their own canvas. Reflecting on my husband and son's situation, I learned they were fined and sentenced to 1 year in prison for manufacturing and selling counterfeit goods. Despite their significant debt, they were granted probation after compensating affected stores and partners. Initially, my husband seemed to operate the shop legitimately, but one day he made a costly mistake by selling a product as used instead of secondhand, realizing that even high-end brand wallets dropped in value without a certificate. My husband gradually found legitimate sales boring, realizing that copying certificates could significantly increase prices. He started dealing in copied items bought from overseas sites and sold them online. With everything concluded within the computer, there was no direct interaction with people, making it easier for them to justify their actions. This sparked outrage among my husband's family, leading to pressure for a divorce. Despite significant debt, our relatives encouraged them to rehabilitate earnestly, finding them jobs in a factory owned by our relatives. They worked diligently from early morning until late at night without complaints. My situation caused worry among my relatives and neighbors, who suggested I start a class to support myself. Losing my husband's income meant I had to find work, so eventually my dream of teaching art began to turn into reality. Students showed me their works of hope, and I gave them reviews, encouraging their progress. After the class, I explained to the students the importance of self-expression in art, emphasizing that it's not about drawing correctly but about conveying emotions and meanings. As the students left, I reflected on their hope-filled artworks and the beauty of self-expression. Alone in the classroom, I added a new drawing titled Rebirth beside my hopeful works. As the clock on the wall ticked, I realized my husband and Daniel would soon be home for the first time in years. Despite my doubts and struggles, I wanted to support their earnest efforts to change. When they arrived, I welcomed them with open arms, acknowledging the uncertainty of our future together. All I could do was live my best in a future unknown to anyone.